Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Thomas Grayson moved into his dream farmhouse on a peaceful corner lot, he never expected it to become the battleground for a bitter neighborhood feud. Faced with entitled neighbors and escalating hostility, Thomas had to fight not just for his property, but for his family's peace and safety. Thomas Grayson is a devoted father and a diligent professional who recently took a leap of faith to fulfill his long-held dream of owning a tranquil home far from the chaos of urban life. After years of saving and meticulous planning, he purchased a charming farmhouse-style home on the outskirts of Riverside, Ohio. For Thomas, this house was not just a piece of real estate, but a vision of a peaceful future, a place where his children could roam freely and his loyal golden retriever, Max, could enjoy the sprawling yard. The house is located on a picturesque corner lot bordered by two busy streets that feed into Riverside's main thoroughfares. The property's vast lawn, once lush and green, boasts a natural openness that invites serenity. However, this openness came with an unexpected challenge. Unlike most properties in the area, the previous owners had never installed a fence, valuing the aesthetic of an unbroken landscape. While the lack of a barrier allowed for an unobstructed view of the neighborhood's charming skyline, it also left the property vulnerable to intrusion, a reality Thomas had not anticipated when he signed the papers. For the first few months, Thomas reveled in his newfound sanctuary. He spent weekends planting flowers, organizing family barbecues, and building a small vegetable garden with his children. Life seemed idyllic until the city announced a major road construction project on Riverside's busiest avenue. Almost overnight, his quiet retreat turned into a chaotic shortcut. Impatient drivers seeking to avoid traffic jams began using his yard as a makeshift detour. What started as a trickle of vehicles quickly became a flood, with dozens of cars cutting across his lawn daily. The relentless stream of cars left deep ruts in the grass, creating unsightly scars that marred the landscape Thomas had worked so hard to maintain. The noise from honking horns and the occasional screech of tires shattered the peace he had cherished. On one particularly alarming morning, a speeding sedan narrowly missed Max, who had ventured into the yard for his morning exercise. The incident left Thomas shaken and ignited his determination to protect his home. Thomas's attempts to address the issue began modestly. He placed polite signs around the yard requesting drivers to respect his property, hoping for understanding. Instead, the signs were ignored, and the problem escalated. Strangers treated his lawn like public property, their entitlement becoming more apparent with each passing day. What should have been a haven for his family now felt like an exposed battlefield, and Thomas realized he could no longer rely on goodwill alone to reclaim the peace he had worked so hard to build. The trouble truly began when Thomas erected private property signs around the perimeter of his yard. The once silent murmurs of discontent erupted into vocal outrage, spearheaded by none other than Karen, a self-proclaimed community leader who drove a gleaming white Tesla. Karen's sense of entitlement knew no bounds. She argued that Thomas's open lawn had always served as a convenient cut-through for the community, claiming it was practically a public right. She dismissed his signs as an affront to the neighborhood's unity, vowing to fight what she deemed an attack on their shared way of life. As Karen's indignation gained traction, her influence over other neighbors became evident. Small groups began forming near Thomas's driveway, loudly voicing their dissatisfaction. At night, anonymous letters with thinly veiled threats started appearing on his doorstep. Messages scrawled in sharp black ink warned him to reconsider or face consequences. Some drivers took to honking their horns and revving their engines as they passed his house, creating an atmosphere of intimidation that seeped into every corner of Thomas's once serene sanctuary. Karen escalated her campaign by organizing a community meeting in the local park. With a dramatic flair, she laid out her case against Thomas, painting him as an outsider with no regard for their traditions. Her speeches were laden with emotional appeals, claiming that his fence would divide the neighborhood and endanger children who might now have to walk longer distances to school. She circulated a petition, framing it as a communal effort to protect their rights, and many neighbors signed without even understanding the full implications. Despite the mounting hostility, Thomas refused to be cowed. Determined to reclaim his property and protect his family, he hired a reputable construction crew to build the fence. Work began promptly, with a solid plan to erect a secure 6-foot barrier around his yard. At the same time, Thomas invested in state-of-the-art surveillance equipment, strategically placing cameras to cover every vulnerable angle of his property. The cameras served a dual purpose, capturing any further acts of aggression and providing a sense of security for his family. When Karen learned of the construction, her outrage reached a fever pitch. She hastily organized another meeting, this time in her own backyard, where she rallied her most ardent supporters. Discussions turned heated as attendees brainstormed ways to stop the destruction of their beloved shortcut. Some suggested filing complaints with the city about the unsightly construction, while others proposed more direct measures, hinting at vandalism. True to their word, Karen and her supporters launched a barrage of complaints to the local zoning office, claiming that Thomas's fence violated neighborhood ordinances. Inspectors were sent to the property, but Thomas, ever meticulous, presented all the necessary permits and documentation to prove the fence was entirely within his rights. The inspectors left satisfied, but the neighbors' bitterness only deepened. As the fence neared completion, acts of defiance became bolder. One morning, Thomas awoke to find deep gouges carved into the wooden panels of the partially constructed barrier. Another time, his contractor reported being harassed by a group of neighbors who demanded he abandon the project. Thomas documented every incident, forwarding evidence to his attorney and local authorities to build a case against the harassment. Through it all, Karen remained undeterred. She began leveraging social media, creating a neighborhood Facebook group titled Save Our Shortcut, where she encouraged members to share grievances and proof of the supposed harm Thomas's actions were causing. Posts ranged from exaggerated tales of inconvenience to outright fabrications, such as claims that emergency vehicles would now face delays due to the fence. Despite the relentless opposition, Thomas stood firm. He knew that caving to the pressure would only embolden those who sought to trample his rights. Every threat, every sneer from passing cars, and every late-night knock on his door only solidified his resolve. For Thomas, this was no longer just about a fence. It was about standing up to the entitlement and ensuring that his family's safety and peace of mind came first. The turning point came late one evening when Thomas's surveillance cameras captured a chilling scene. Under the cover of darkness, a group of masked individuals crept onto his property, armed with hammers and crowbars. Their intent was clear: to dismantle the newly constructed fence that had become a symbol of defiance against their demands. As the sound of splintering wood echoed through the night, Thomas immediately called the police. Although the vandals fled before authorities arrived, the high-definition footage provided irrefutable evidence of their actions. The next morning, Thomas woke to another act of intimidation. His car, parked in the driveway, was doused with bright red paint, and the words "traitor" were crudely spray-painted across the side of his house. The sight was a gut punch, but instead of retreating, Thomas grew more resolute. He worked with his attorney to compile the growing list of offenses, determined to hold the perpetrators accountable. Meanwhile, Karen escalated her efforts by filing a lawsuit on behalf of a self-proclaimed neighborhood coalition. The suit claimed that Thomas's fence unlawfully restricted public access, a baseless argument aimed at applying legal pressure. However, Thomas and his lawyer were ready. They presented detailed property surveys, permits, and documentation proving the fence's compliance with all zoning laws. The evidence dismantled Karen's claims, but the legal battle drained Thomas emotionally and financially. As the case unfolded, the hostility reached a fever pitch. One night, Thomas was jolted awake by the acrid smell of smoke. Rushing outside, he discovered that someone had set a trash bin ablaze near his home. The flames were extinguished before they could spread, but the incident underscored the dangerous lengths to which his adversaries were willing to go. In response, Thomas fortified his property further. He installed additional security cameras with motion-activated floodlights, creating a network of vigilance that left no corner of his yard unmonitored. Yet, the harassment persisted. Anonymous letters arrived with disturbing regularity, containing threats that ranged from vague warnings to explicit references to his family's safety. One particularly chilling note included a photograph of his children playing in the yard, accompanied by the ominous message, "We're watching." Thomas reported every incident to the authorities, who increased patrols in the area but struggled to identify the culprits. Meanwhile, Karen and her supporters doubled down on their smear campaign. Posts in the neighborhood Facebook group accused Thomas of being anti-community and selfish, fueling further resentment. Karen even staged a protest outside his property, with participants holding signs demanding the removal of the fence and chanting slogans about preserving neighborhood traditions. Despite the relentless pressure, Thomas refused to back down. He understood that giving in would set a dangerous precedent, not just for himself, but for anyone facing similar forms of entitlement and intimidation. His unwavering stance turned him into a polarizing figure. While some neighbors continued their aggressive tactics, others began quietly expressing support, commending his courage to stand up for his rights. The breaking point came when Thomas's attorney filed a counterclaim against Karen and the coalition, citing harassment, defamation, and property damage. The legal move sent shockwaves through the neighborhood, forcing many of Karen's supporters to reconsider their involvement. As the case headed toward its conclusion, Thomas prepared for what he hoped would be the final chapter in a battle that had consumed his life for months. The courtroom was tense as the final verdict was announced. The judge, after carefully reviewing all evidence, unequivocally ruled in Thomas's favor. The arguments presented by Karen and her self-styled neighborhood coalition crumbled under the weight of legal documentation proving the fence's compliance with property laws and zoning regulations. The judge dismissed their lawsuit, labeling it as baseless and frivolous. In a decisive move, the court imposed penalties on Karen for submitting false claims and inciting acts of vandalism. She was fined a substantial amount, which was used to compensate Thomas for the damage to his fence and property. Additionally, Karen received a community service sentence, requiring her to contribute hours to neighborhood beautification projects, a consequence that left her visibly humiliated. The city council, responding to the turmoil, took action to restore order. No through traffic signs were erected at both ends of the streets bordering Thomas's property, effectively discouraging further attempts to treat his lawn as a shortcut. The move was praised by local residents who had grown tired of the chaos, marking a significant shift in neighborhood dynamics. As the dust settled, the neighborhood's perception of Karen began to change. Once a vocal leader, she now found herself increasingly isolated. Former allies who had supported her protests and signed her petitions started to distance themselves, embarrassed by the revelations of her misconduct. Whispers of disapproval replaced cheers of solidarity, and Karen's presence at community events became noticeably sparse. Meanwhile, several families approached Thomas, offering heartfelt apologies for their earlier actions. One couple admitted they had signed Karen's petition without fully understanding the implications and expressed regret for their involvement. Another neighbor, a retired teacher, brought over a homemade pie as a peace offering, saying, "You were right to stand your ground. We should have seen it sooner." Thomas accepted these gestures with grace, recognizing that not all his neighbors had acted out of malice. For many, the situation had been a lesson in the dangers of mob mentality and the importance of critical thinking. Slowly but surely, the tension that had gripped the community began to dissipate. With the legal battles behind him, Thomas focused on rebuilding the sense of tranquility that had drawn him to the property in the first place. The fence, now a symbol of his perseverance, stood tall and unyielding, offering his family the privacy and safety they deserved. He hosted a small gathering in his backyard, inviting the neighbors who had supported him and those who had made amends. The event was a quiet celebration of resilience and community, filled with laughter and a renewed sense of camaraderie. The city's intervention also had a lasting impact. Traffic on the surrounding streets decreased significantly, making the area safer for pedestrians and children. Property values in the neighborhood began to rise, and other homeowners took inspiration from Thomas's actions, making improvements to their own properties. As for Karen, she sold her home and moved out of the neighborhood within a year. Her departure marked the end of a contentious chapter for Riverside, leaving the community to rebuild and heal. Thomas often reflected on the ordeal, grateful for the lessons it had taught him. The experience reaffirmed his belief in the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity. His resolve not only protected his family's sanctuary, but also fostered a newfound sense of unity among his neighbors. It was a hard-fought victory, but one that left a lasting legacy of respect and resilience. In the months following the resolution, Thomas began to see the fruits of his perseverance. The once trodden grass of his yard slowly began to recover thanks to diligent reseeding and care. The deep tire ruts that had scarred the lawn were replaced with lush greenery, creating a picturesque setting that matched Thomas's original vision of a peaceful family retreat. For his children, the yard became a safe haven where they could run freely, build forts, and play without the constant fear of speeding cars. Even Max, the family's golden retriever, seemed to reclaim his territory, bounding across the yard with an unburdened joy that reflected the family's renewed sense of security. With the fence in place and the chaos behind him, Thomas felt it was time to give back to the neighbors who had stood by his side. He organized a series of backyard barbecues, inviting those who had supported him and even extending an olive branch to those who had apologized. These gatherings became a cornerstone of community connection, filled with laughter, shared stories, and an atmosphere of reconciliation. The once contentious neighborhood began to feel like a community again, with Thomas's home as a symbol of resilience and renewal. For Thomas, the experience was more than a personal victory. It was a reaffirmation of his values. He took pride in having protected his family's sanctuary and in setting a precedent for standing up against entitlement. The ordeal, though challenging, left him with a deeper appreciation for the importance of boundaries, both physical and metaphorical, in preserving peace and harmony. The ripple effects of Thomas's actions extended far beyond his property line. With the traffic through the neighborhood significantly reduced, the streets became quieter and safer. Children began riding their bikes and playing games without the constant disruption of passing cars. Parents expressed relief at the newfound calm, noting that the reduction in through traffic made their daily routines, from walking to school to evening strolls, far more enjoyable and stress-free. Property values in the area began to climb, a direct result of the improved safety and reduced congestion. Real estate agents started highlighting the neighborhood's transformation in their listings, and prospective buyers were drawn to the sense of stability that had replaced the earlier chaos. Thomas's fence, initially a point of contention, became a celebrated feature, inspiring other homeowners to take similar steps to enhance their properties. Several residents who had once criticized Thomas found themselves following his lead, installing their own fences and landscaping their yards to create private, peaceful spaces. The city council, impressed by the resolution and its impact, decided to use the neighborhood as a case study in urban planning. They introduced new measures to manage traffic flow, including the installation of speed bumps and better signage throughout Riverside. The lessons learned from Thomas's case were implemented in other parts of the city, proving that proactive action by residents could lead to meaningful change. The story of Thomas and his fence became a local legend, often recounted as an example of standing firm against adversity. It inspired conversations about property rights, community dynamics, and the importance of balancing individual needs with collective well-being. Thomas was even invited to speak at a city planning meeting where he shared his experiences and encouraged others to advocate for their rights while fostering positive relationships with their neighbors. Over time, the neighborhood's sense of unity deepened. Thomas collaborated with other residents to create a neighborhood watch program, further enhancing the area's safety. The program's success was evident in the sharp decline in petty crimes and the renewed trust among neighbors. What had started as a divisive conflict ultimately brought the community closer together. Thomas's yard, once marred by controversy, became a symbol of transformation. He added a beautiful garden along the fence line, planting native flowers that attracted butterflies and birds. The local gardening club even featured his property in their annual tour, showcasing it as a testament to resilience and creativity. Reflecting on the journey, Thomas felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The struggles he endured had not only safeguarded his family's peace, but had also sparked a broader movement toward respect, safety, and community spirit. His perseverance had turned a contentious battle into a legacy of positive change, proving that even the most challenging situations could yield unexpectedly rewarding outcomes. As Thomas looked back on the turbulent months that had disrupted his once idyllic life, he felt a profound sense of accomplishment and clarity. The experience had tested him in ways he never anticipated, forcing him to confront not just external opposition, but also his own resolve. Standing up for his rights had required patience, determination, and an unwavering belief in the principles of fairness and personal sovereignty. Thomas realized that the key to his victory was preparation. By meticulously documenting every interaction, retaining skilled legal counsel, and maintaining composure in the face of hostility, he had built an unassailable case. These steps, though exhausting, proved vital in navigating the legal and social challenges he faced. For Thomas, the ordeal became a lesson in the importance of vigilance and the necessity of standing firm, even when the odds seemed daunting. The journey also highlighted a broader truth. Boundaries, both physical and metaphorical, are essential for harmony. While the fence was initially viewed as a divisive barrier, it ultimately served as a catalyst for positive change, prompting the neighborhood to reevaluate its dynamics and priorities. Thomas's steadfastness sent a powerful message that respect for individual rights is the cornerstone of any thriving community. Though setting boundaries can be unpopular and even contentious, it is often the only way to ensure order and protect what matters most. Thomas's story underscored the value of perseverance and the courage it takes to uphold one's convictions. In the end, his efforts not only safeguarded his family's peace, but also inspired a movement toward mutual respect and understanding within the neighborhood. As Thomas stood by his fence, now surrounded by blooming flowers and fluttering butterflies, he felt a renewed sense of pride. The challenges he had faced were not just obstacles, but opportunities to grow, to learn, and to lead by example. For Thomas, the fence was more than a boundary. It was a testament to resilience, a symbol of justice, and a reminder that even in the face of adversity, the right path is worth pursuing.